Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today, I'd like to talk about the fear of psi. Psi, P-S-I, is the term that parapsychologists use to refer to the phenomena that they study, which is basically, in parapsychological language, extrasensory perception, including telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition, and psychokinesis, or mind over matter, which could also include psychic healing, and questions related to survival of the human personality after physical death, post-mortem survival. Now, why should anybody be afraid of any of that? In fact, there are some parapsychologists I know and respect highly, like Ed May, who says he's never encountered any fear of psi, and he doesn't think that skeptics, for example, who are adamantly insisting on not accepting the data, that they're doing it based on subconscious motivations. I disagree. I think that the fear of psi is very, very real in our culture. You can see it all the time in horror movies, of course, or you could just take a look at all of the Facebook groups related to the term paranormal and look at the kind of pictures that they show of graves and tombstones and horrible things happening. And of course, the horror movie market is very real. Films like The Exorcist and Poltergeist have portrayed psychic phenomena in the most horrifying manner. But more than that, think about this. It's only about 300 years, which in historical terms isn't that far away from us today, when witches were burned at the stake. And in fact, historians tell us that perhaps 100,000 witches were tortured and burned at the stake for exhibiting what their neighbors feared, some sort of psychic hex or spell or something that caused them to be frightened. And actually, even today, in some countries, I think particularly in Africa, witches are still persecuted, or people who are assumed to have psychic powers are persecuted. So there's the fear that somebody who has psychokinetic abilities might use it in a negative way toward oneself. And one needs to protect oneself against that. But there are many other fears. I want to talk about, in addition to the fear of psi, something known as the beginner's effect. I find it over and over again in parapsychology research and in many informal interactions that I've had with people, that when I introduce them to some form of psychic functioning, like remote viewing, the very first time they try it, they're naive, but they're open-minded, and they give it a shot, and wow! Like 100% accurate, and then it shuts down. Another expression of this might be the decline effect, which has been reported in some parapsychological experiments, but there could be other causes for the decline effect, such as boredom doing card guessing tests. But fear of psi, if you are first encountering paranormal experiences, you can generate a lot of excitement, like, oh wow, look what I can do. But then you begin to wonder, do I need to be responsible for this? What if I get a precognitive dream that somebody who was close to me is going to be killed in a car accident? And then it happens. Am I guilty because I didn't warn them? Now, this is not just a fantasy. I know of such a case. And I know of many other cases, frankly, where psychic phenomena can be really frightening and legitimately so. But that aside, let's suppose, even if it's not a frightening instance, if I have foreknowledge about a potential terrible event, an accident, a shooting, a disaster of some sort, that places a burden on me. What am I to do with that knowledge? I personally had such an experience when Ted Owens, the PK man who I studied for some 10 years, called me up on one occasion and said, Jeffrey, this is the most important phone call you will ever receive. You must contact the United States government and tell them not to launch the next space shuttle flight because my UFOs are going to knock it out of the sky. That was right before the Challenger launch in 1986. And I felt a certain burden. Who was I to contact? Why would they believe me? Why should I do it? And in the end, I didn't do anything. But there, we lost a space shuttle. So there's the question of burden. But another question is, will people think I'm crazy? How will people judge me if I claim to have some sort of psychic or intuitive knowledge? Isn't it a bit egotistical? Aren't people going to think I'm a bit crazy? Now, there was a physicist, Burge, for whom the Burge Physics Building at the University of California, Berkeley was named. And he actually, I found in the library at UC Berkeley when I was a student, a monograph he had written about parapsychology. And it was his conclusion, not only that there was nothing to the field, he says, but this is a dangerous field to get into because people who study parapsychology risk going insane. Now, I don't know any parapsychologists who have gone insane. I can say that. I think that mental health problems amongst parapsychologists are no different than the population at large. But there is this fear of either going insane or being thought insane because you're coming up with belief systems that are characteristic sometimes of psychotic delusions. In fact, I will say this, I hear on a regular basis from people who tell me that they are being attacked psychically by government mind control. And my suspicion is, I don't have proof, but my suspicion is that a good many, if not all of these people, are suffering from forms of schizophrenia, paranoia. Now, we don't know the causes of all of these diseases. There's some good literature that suggests there could be forms of psychic attack, not government mind control, but other forms of psychic invasion that could mimic that sort of thing. Wilson Van Dusen, a psychologist, long deceased, but a man I met and greatly respected, wrote about the presence of spirits, and he meant it in the world of madness. He was the chief psychologist at Napa State Hospital in California, big mental institution at the time. And he felt that the psychotic patients were actually suffering from spiritual disturbances by spirits, by negative spirits. And that raises a whole other topic, which I have addressed in the past and will address again, concerning psychic self-defense. But the question of fear is what I want to address today. So there may well be legitimate reasons to be afraid. Certainly, in my case, just studying parapsychology has created a certain stigma, not only for me, but I can tell you this, every parapsychologist I know has their war stories. Now, in my case, it was quite extreme because there was an enormous amount of opposition when I obtained my doctoral degree in parapsychology. The skeptics launched they're not real skeptics either. The pseudo-skeptics is probably a better word because they're already convinced of their position. A true skeptic is skeptical of their own beliefs, but these pseudo-skeptics launched an effort to get the university to revoke my doctoral degree. And to some degree, they were successful. However, at the end, I prevailed, but then I was attacked. I was libeled. And I had to fight a libel suit that lasted for 6 painful years of my life until I was able to vindicate my name. So that's a real risk. That's a real reason for people to be careful when they engage in this field, even though it's a field where, while the guardians of reality and society and the scientific and academic communities often look down on parapsychology, the truth is that surveys such as Gallup surveys show that the general public is favorably disposed to this field because, well, why not? 2/3 of the population are having psychic experiences and know it. So the fear of going insane, the fear of having other people think you're going insane, the fear of being under psychic attack are some of the fears that cause people to close down after they first experience psychic functioning. Now, I could go on and list other fears related to, for example, career advancement. But I think I've made the point. And at this point, for those of you who are viewing, and I presume at some point I may do a survey of people who are viewing the InPresence series to find out more about you and what you want and how I can best assist you. But I presume many of you are interested in cultivating your own psychic abilities. I know that some of the most popular video conversations that I've released are about training remote viewing, training psychokinesis, learning how to use ESP. And in my opinion, to be good at it, you need to take a look and see what fears are there in the back of your mind regarding psychic functioning. And how are you dealing with those fears? I know in my case, I've been kind of, I don't know, maybe just bold and reckless. I can't say that I've ever let those fears stop me, but frankly, maybe I have. Maybe I would be doing much more in the way of remote viewing and psychic functioning myself, and instead of being the guy who talks about it on video. So yes, it's something I need to look at as well. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you for being with me.